Hey there, welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and REVR sent me their V5 Pro off-road electric bike to review. So to test both the bike and the battery's performance, we're going to take it out for a nice long test ride to see what it can do on a wide variety of terrains. We'll also take a close look at the bike's components and features after we get it unboxed and assembled. As always, no pressure, but if you decide to pick one of these up, don't forget to use my discount code and affiliate link below the video to save yourself 50 bucks and help support my content. Also, if you're watching this video shortly after its release, REVR may still be running the promos you see on the screen, which include some sizable discounts, bonus points, and free gifts. The V5 Pro does come partially assembled, but there are a large number of components and fasteners that'll need to be installed. It's always a good idea to double check the factory installed fasteners for tightness as well, and like the manual says, it's always best to have a qualified mechanic check everything over before your first ride at the very least, and I am certainly not a mechanic, so everything you see in here in this video is all use at your own risk information. Now, the Pro version's battery here has 18 amp hours of capacity, whereas the non-Pro V5 model shows 20 amp hours of capacity and also seems to have a slightly more powerful motor, at least at peak. You can charge the battery with it in place, but we'll get it unlocked and removed, hit the on switch here, and it shows that it's fully charged, but I'm still going to plug it in just to make sure that it's topped off. It looks like the charger has an output of 2 amps and is UL listed, which is certainly a good thing. And before you charge a battery, of course, you always want to turn it off and make sure you keep a close eye on it, as it could be a fire hazard. As far as the toolkit, it looks like we do get a wide variety of Allens and wrenches. And the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the steering head is perpendicular to the forks, and then we'll get that tightened down so the bearings are properly seated, and then snug up the pinch bolts to lock it in place. Next, we'll remove all 3 of the fasteners for the handlebars and get those in place. And thankfully, I didn't have to look too far to find my 4th fastener. And then I'm just going to hit all 4 of these in a crisscross pattern until they're properly snugged in place. Next, we'll get the front fender installed on the bike, and the fastener and washer and nut are already in place there. We've just got to get them removed and then reinstalled. Same goes for the 2 fasteners on the side. We'll get the temporary axle spacer here removed. And we'll grab the front tire here and line that up with the forks and the brakes. Put the kickstand down, which does stay out of the way of the pedals. We do get a quick release, which of course you want to be extra careful in installing. We certainly do not want to lose that front wheel. We'll get that separated and installed. Of course, want to make sure that these little tabs end up in the holes on both sides. Get everything tightened down here and locked in place. The brackets for the headlights were probably one of the most confusing parts of this, but I believe this is how you want to get them installed on the bike. The instructions don't say too much about what fasteners go where, but these seem like a good option here, and they fit the nuts that went on the backside here. These do not seem to get a washer, but we'll get that side snugged down. The left side here was essentially the same, just sort of a mirrored version of the right. With those in place, we can grab the headlight and get that installed. Just line these holes up with the brackets and use these fasteners and washers. We'll grab the plug from the harness and from the back of the light and get those plugged in. And after positioning the headlight, I just snugged those down into place. For the passenger pegs here, I think we're supposed to stick these washers on here for a little bit more of a platform. And then I'm guessing that we're supposed to use these fasteners, even though they do seem a little bit small for the holes. But they were the only ones that seemed to thread into the inserts in the frame here. So we'll get those installed and snugged into place. The chains seem to have come off at some point here, so I just extended the derailleur and got that reinstalled. And to get the rear fender secured, I just pulled out the fasteners from the frame here and reinstalled them once the brackets were in place. The pedals are labeled and show which direction that they thread into the crank, so the right side is just threaded normally here. The left side is threaded in reverse. Next, I installed the reflectors, which may be oriented incorrectly. It's a little bit hard to tell in the instructions. The front one, however, was pretty self-explanatory. I also installed the bell, which sounds like a bell. We've also got a 7-speed Shimano shifter, a quarter twist throttle, as well as a fairly easily twistable and removable ergonomic rubberized grip here that may require some glue. The opposite side moved a little bit, but seemed to hang on a little better. And with the charger giving me the green light indicating the battery was fully charged, I could get it back on the bike, locked in place, and fire up the display, which is a nice colorful display, and it looks like we've got 5 pedal assist level settings. Now, I did have to get into the programming menu here by holding down the plus and minus buttons and sort of clicking through the different PO options until I got to PO8, which showed a 0028, which I assumed must be the top speed. So I dropped this down to 20 just to meet the Class 2 classifications and decal that it comes with. If we hold the plus button down, the headlight will come on, and I was a little bit surprised to see that the side halos didn't seem to do anything, but it does seem like we have a pretty nice, bright, wide beam pattern, and we do have a running light on the back, which somewhat disappointingly seems almost indistinguishable from the brake light, but if we turn the headlight and tail light off and then squeeze the brakes, you can tell that it comes on and actually stays on for a couple seconds. Speaking of the brakes, we've got a set of iZoom master cylinders here, which have shorty levers that do have a pretty nice feel to them. And if you want to adjust how close they come to the bars, all you have to do is turn this little barrel adjuster here. Down on the business end, we've got 160mm slotted rotors and hydraulic single piston calipers. The back has essentially an identical setup, and we can also see our 750 watt hub motor here, and if you're interested, there's the model information. For tires, we've got fairly aggressive knobby Kenda tires, which is certainly a good, well-known brand. They're a 90-100-16 or 20x4. We do have some suspension up front on the dual crown forks, but it's non-adjustable, unlike the non-pro version, which does at least have a lockout. And under my weight, anyways, it does seem like it should be sufficient. Around back, you'll find a swing arm with dual coil-over shocks, which are adjustable as far as the preload goes. There are no damping settings on these that I could find. And the way this bike came from the factory, it did seem a little bit stiff, so I decided to loosen up the preload here on both sides. And once I had both springs as loose as they could go, I just tightened each of them down to the point where the spring was compressed just a little bit so they wouldn't loosen up on the ride. Certainly seemed like things should be a little bit more comfy that way. Chainring does have a little bit of protection for the chain and is small to medium size. The crank is fairly long, and the pedals are kind of a nice, grippy, low-profile design. And if we follow the chain back here, we can see our 7-speed cassette along with the Shimano tourney derailleur. And unlike some other e-bikes that I've tested, it seems like they must set the derailleurs properly at the factory. All the gears seem to line up, and it didn't jump off on the high nor the low ends. And finally, I grabbed my Tusk low pressure tire gauge here to check both the front and the rear, and I set them both right around 10 psi for some extra comfort. On the website, the bike claims to have a 450-pound load carrying capacity, and the frame certainly seems pretty heavy-duty. None of the welds were extremely pretty. Some did seem to have some pinholes in them, but as far as I could tell, there weren't any major issues. I'm not a huge fan of how the cables run underneath the frame here, nor the fact that we don't have a grommet on the bottom, but there is one up at the top here, as well as one near the steering neck. And the battery tray seems to be fairly well anchored to the frame. The tan faux leather dual density foam motorcycle-ish style seat is certainly lengthy and seems to be fairly thick, and it does have a nice feel to it. To give you an idea of the size of this bike, I'm about 5'10", I've got a 31-inch inseam, and I weigh about 150 pounds, and I am sort of over the front end of this thing when I'm sitting on it, mostly due to the rather low-rise handlebars on here, which could be switched out for something else if you liked. As far as the pedal stroke goes on this, seated in sort of the middle of the seat, I can put a decent amount of power down. There is certainly some ample room in the back here if I wanted to scoot back. Sitting over the very front seems like it'll be a little bit hard to pedal, but then there might be enough room for a passenger. And again, with my 31-inch inseam height, I can stand over this bike with both feet flat on the ground, no problem. If I put my 150 pounds on the seat, it does squish down a little bit. Before I headed out on the test ride, I added a few accessories of my own, like this Rock Bros tank bag / cell phone holder, so I could store my extra battery, my tripod, and the bike's toolkit. Now, because of the shape of the ergonomic grips, I wasn't able to install my usual bar end mirrors, so instead I opted for these motorcycle-style mirrors, which did seem to work fairly well. They are infinitely adjustable, and if you don't tighten them down too much, they move pretty easily, which could save them in a crash. And then on an absolutely gorgeous 70-degree fall day, the bike and I headed out for a test ride. So it's probably a little bit hard to tell through the camera, but we are at the base of a fairly steep hill, and we are down 1 bar on the battery meter, 47.9 volts. Been riding for almost an hour at this point, 53 minutes, and we've got 11 miles on. So performance might be slightly reduced at this point, but let's see what we can get out of this bike for some hill climbing ability without using the pedals at all, just the throttle. Ready, go. I can certainly do it. Only about 12 miles an hour, but that is a fairly steep hill. What if we back down and try to start on the steepest part here? Well, almost seems like it's not going to be able to do it, but then it does. So it definitely has some torque. How about a little bit of a brake test when we go to grab the camera? Woo! Oh yeah, this bike is certainly not the lightest thing. I think it's somewhere around 85 pounds, but they seem to stop it really well. Now, because this throttle kind of takes so long to really do anything, wheelies are going to be a little bit difficult, but if we time it right... yeah, I'd say it's possible. The rather slow throttle response is also pretty evident when you try to do a 0 to top speed run, and of course it's only going to hit 20 since I have it programmed as a class 2. It takes about 9.5 seconds to get there. Then if we shift the bike back down to first gear on the Shimano 7-speed and use the pedals, again, it takes a little bit to get the electronic assistance going, but it does take off fairly quickly then, and we still end up with somewhere around 9.5 seconds. Tires make a little bit of noise on the pavement, but it's really not too bad. You can hear the motor maybe just a tad. At almost 20 miles an hour, pedaling actually feels really pretty comfortable. Your legs rub on the side of the seat a little bit, which certainly can get a little bit annoying, but of course there is always the option for the throttle. And if we hold the throttle in a steady position and hold the minus button down here, it changes it to P, which means it actually will hold that speed for you like actual cruise control. And then all we got to do is either tap the brakes or hit the throttle and it'll resume normal riding operation. This thing really turns pretty easily. It doesn't feel uncomfortable at all. It actually really handles kind of nice. I think maybe it is a little bit top heavy feeling, but I mean it's still, for me anyways, at my skill level, easily controlled, and it makes the bike feel pretty nimble. I do really like the fact that with this thing's top speed brought down to 20 miles an hour, that at that speed I'm actually able to keep up and do a decent amount of helpful pedaling. Wow, what an absolutely gorgeous day, huh? So of course you want to check your own regulations and talk to the people that are in charge of the land that you want to ride on. But in this county, since Wisconsin back in 2019 actually declassified e-bikes, even class 2 e-bikes, as motorized vehicles, they're now allowed on the county forest land, which is super neat. Really opens up a lot of good riding opportunities. I'm a little bit nervous with the wet leaves, but it seems like these knobby Kenda tires are hanging on to everything pretty well. And now that I'm off of the pavement and the tires aren't whining, you can kind of hear that motor a little bit. The suspension is soaking up some of the bumps, but there's certainly still a few that are making me bounce around a little bit. But on this fairly well-groomed trail, even at 20 miles an hour, whoa, that's water. Oh, I want to avoid that. This thing is certainly a pleasant ride, so far anyway. I'm definitely glad that I softened that rear suspension up, because I think that would have been a little bit jarring on a standing up feel. I'm over the bars a little bit, maybe more than I would like to be, a little bit hunched, but that gets the weight over the front end, which is good, because then you have a reduced chance of losing traction. And it's not super powerful up those hills, but I mean, it's doing more than a good enough job, and I mean, if it can get you out to a beautiful spot like this, how can you complain about that, you know? Camo almost blends in. Perfect time of year. The throttle does hang a little bit, or I suppose I should say the assistance hangs a little bit after you're done pedaling, but the throttle immediately cuts off when you let it go. Also, if you hit either of the brakes, there's a sensor in there that tells the motor to stop working, so always be ready to grab those brakes just in case. Front suspension doesn't seem to bottom. And it's actually, oh, look at the deer. It's doing a pretty good job soaking things up. Probably should have spaced those brakes off a little bit further. I'm running into my finger there, but they seem to work pretty good for controlling the bike, even when I just have one finger on, and they definitely have more than enough power, it seems. Yeah, I think maybe we're running a little bit low on power, just because we've dropped down to 45.5 volts, and we've only got 1 bar left. Oh, now we're back to 2. So I think the bike has started to conserve, or try to conserve energy for me a little bit, and I don't want to conserve power, I want a wheelie. Jump's okay. A little bit of slamming around going on there. Yeah, that'll do it though. I think it says in the manual specifically that it's not meant for crazy off-roading. I don't know if they would classify that as something that's too much or not. I'd say pedaling off-road works fairly well. You could, of course, drop it down a level. I do find myself wishing that it had a torque sensor rather than a cadence sensor. The cadence sensor, of course, just measures that you're pedaling, and then depending on your pedal assist level setting will change your speed. But it is sort of nice to have the ability to meter your speed with the amount of pressure that you're putting or torque that you're putting on the pedals. Just makes it a little bit more of an intuitive riding experience, where this can sort of get away from you if you're not paying attention to what pedal assist level you're on. Boy, for as heavy as this bike is, I guess I'm not at the top of the hill yet, but for as heavy as this is, that 7 speeds and I guess the tall first actually makes this thing, I would say, manageable without any battery power or any electric assistance. I mean, if you had to. Well, we don't have any mud up on the seat, so it seems like the fenders did at least a little bit of a good job keeping the mud off of me. Definitely a little bit coming up in places. Certainly some on the frame and the battery a bit there, but I suppose we didn't really run through anything too nasty. So what do we end up with here after 2 hours and 17 minutes of riding, or at least the bike being on? We put on 24 miles. And as you can see, battery bar is flashing there, but it was still giving me power right up to the last second. Looks like we've got 39.1 volts left. And after all that riding, I've got to say the seat did start to get maybe just a tad bit uncomfortable, or I guess my backside got a little bit uncomfortable towards the very end. But of course, after 2 hours and 24 miles on anything, I would expect to be slightly uncomfortable. So really not a bad seat. And honestly, the bike's ergonomics sort of as a whole really worked pretty darn well for me. I didn't really feel myself getting too sore or worn out. I think having the handlebars slightly higher might be a little bit more comfortable, but having them in this sort of lower position makes for a bit of a unique and kind of fun riding experience that I certainly enjoyed. So if you guys have any other comments or questions about this bike, don't be afraid to leave them down in the comments section. And again, of course, absolutely no pressure, but if you decide that one of these bikes is something that you're interested in, don't be afraid to use that $50 off coupon code down in the description and the top pinned comment. I'll also have my affiliate link down there, which doesn't cost you anything extra. I just make a small commission off of the sale. sale, which allows me to keep making videos like this. Until next time, guys, take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out there and enjoy this beautiful world God created for us to enjoy any chance you get. And if you can't do that right now, here's some more videos to check out. In the meantime, we'll catch you guys on the next one.